Hey everybody, welcome back to the Downpour, Emerald City Hockey, and Circling Seattle Sports Seattle Torrent podcast. Charles, it has been a minute since we've been able to record an episode of the Downpour. We had the last few games of the PWHL season before the Olympic break, and now we're even a few games into the Olympic break, and the women's tournament over there in Italy has been underway. Lots of stuff to talk about and catch up on. I will just say this from the beginning for everybody. We are planning on kind of we'll touch on some of the early Olympic stuff now, but we're going to primarily cover the Olympics like in its entirety once that tournament finishes up. We're going to mostly use today's podcast just to catch up on stuff with the Torrent, how they finished out the last bit of the regular season there before this break for the Olympics, and then also just our general thoughts on how the first half of the season went for them, because we are basically at the halfway point. Most of the leagues at the halfway point. Torrent within a game of the halfway point. Feels safe that we could go ahead and call it that. And it's been an interesting ride with the Seattle Torrent so far throughout the first half of the season. So excited to break all of that stuff down here with you, Charles. It's good to be able to be back and doing this.
Yeah, it's good to be back. I mean, it felt like for the longest time, Dylan, head coach Steve O'Rourke has been saying, just got to get to the Olympics, like get to this point. And then there's the sprint that this team has been talking about, right? And it's kind of odd to be at this break point, because it felt like we were finally it was a lot of stop and go. It was like, okay, the team is
Mhm.
announced, and then you stop for a while. Then there's the signing period, then you stop for a bit. Then there's the really quick training camp, and you're into games, and then you're kind of into the thrall of things. And now we're at a stopping point until what the 27th of this month. So no, I mean it's exciting to see the tournament players that are in the Olympics do so well right now. As you mentioned, we'll look at that a bit further. Who knows which teams will truly go that far after the game played today. But it's I don't know, it's so cool to think that the some of the very best players in the world call Seattle home for their to use a like a soccer term, their club team, so to say, right?
Mhm.
So yeah, no, it's great, but obviously a lot to look at and wonder where things went wrong, at least for the last few.
Yes, because as the PWHL comes to a pause for the Olympic break, we look at the Torrent and they are in eighth place. They are dead last in the league standings, 16 points through their 14 games, 4 wins in regulation, 1 overtime win, 2 overtime losses, and then the big number, the 7 regulation losses that the Torrent have had. And that includes 2 losses going into this break, 2 games that it felt like the Torrent, I'm not gonna say I should have won, but we're expected to be very competitive and in a perfect world, you would win both of those, hit the Olympic break with some momentum, climb up in the standings. I mean, you're talking about in this league, particularly because of they have that 3 points per regulation win scoring system. You're talking about a team having potentially 22 points and being up there, in 5th place in the league versus Seattle currently sitting at 16, being in 8th place. The swings when you lose in regulation in this league are huge. Now, on the flip side, that does mean coming out of the Olympics, if the Torrent are able to hit the ground running, they're able to take the momentum that some of their players are building over there at the Olympics because they're playing pretty well. The Torrent players that are there, if you're able to hit the ground running, you can make up the points difference in the standings for what the Torrent are kind of in, the hole that they've dug themselves. It's just by losing those last 2 games, you don't give yourself a ton of wiggle room once you get back into it. That I think is kind of what they've been sacrificing. They haven't been sacrificing their shot at making the top 4 and getting into the playoffs, but they have sacrificed a lot of wiggle room with the kind of slow start to the season, or at least that's how I'm seeing things, Charles.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I mean, as I think said on here, said on my channel, said just in person, not the biggest fan of having to kind of leave things up to this sprint, this last month to the season when we get to what, March.
Yeah.
It's scary. I don't like, because I've seen it with other teams in the city, right? The Mariners, they come up so close playoffs and then they don't make the playoffs. And, you don't want to have to deal with that sort of thing. You could mention the games in hand, but it's only really two. And those are against the teams 4 through 7, because Boston's got 2 games in hand as well in terms of the 16 games. Minnesota and Montreal both have 1 game in hand. Um, it's been interesting. Like, I think we said it when we first started doing this, but like there will be the growing pains. The growing pains would be present. They weren't just gonna, to use that term, hit the ground running right away. It wasn't
Mhm.
gonna come out of training camp. You're all sort of new to each other. Go win a bunch of games. That wasn't just gonna happen. Um, and you can certainly on paper look and say Hillary Knight, Alex Carpenter, Hannah Bilka, Julia Gosling, Daniel Serdachny, Jesse Eldridge, like the D and Kayla Barnes and Emily Brown, and be like, why yeah, why are they sitting at last place in the league? Um, I think a lot of the issues that have taken place for this team makes sense in terms of just, especially when we talked to Steve O'Rourke about the first 10 games, right? About
Mhm.
how certain defensive things are still being installed. I'm sure this, because they're practicing right now. They are back in practice, the ones that are in the Olympics right now. So at least for those players that are back home, that's great. Get the work in, look at film, so on and so forth. But then, as you and I were talking, I think before we started, and I'm sure we'll get into this further, just some of the mistakes where it's just kind of like you don't even make that normally. You didn't make that when you were with whatever team you were with last year. Like these are just things that you kind of wondering, how did you make that mistake? How did you have that mental error? How do you have that gaff? Um, and so the question I've kind of been toying with since that last game against Ottawa, like really, we were in the Kraken meal room and I was talking to Allison Lucan and I was just like, um, how much weight does um the Olympics for the players who are leaving specifically hold on these players? Is it really just the cliche, don't look ahead, right?
Mhm.
I'm sure to some, maybe more than others, you are look. I know Kayla Barnes, I think before that Ottawa game, because I think she was the pregame interview, said it was hard to not look ahead,
Yeah.
So I do wonder about that and how it correlates to some of the mistakes and lapses in play that these other, otherwise top of the world players have had for Seattle to this point.
Yeah, it feels like that has been something that's there, and, no player is probably ever going to admit that, right? Like, that's not something that they're gonna totally talk about, although Caleb Barnes sorta did, right, in the comments that you mentioned, and it does feel like for those last 2 games that it was something that weighed on the team, and it weighed on certain players in particular, and yeah, they were tough games. I went back and I was reviewing them again, obviously watched them live and everything then, and I had taken notes then, but I wanted to rewatch them, kind of fresh perspective, knowing what the end result was, kind of viewing them over, and when I was watching those last 2 games, I couldn't help but notice they get scored on 7 times in those 2 games, and 6 of them are plays that I would describe as just being, you know, either mental errors, mistakes, shooting yourself in the foot, just not being, totally on it, right? You're just not totally locked in. Those mental errors kind of get you, and I'll run through them really quick just to kind of give an idea of what they are. But like you look at the first 2 goals in the Vancouver game, this is the takeover game in Denver, and that first one, you've come out of the gate. Vancouver was a little strong early on, but you've really dominated the first period. Vancouver hasn't had a shot on goal for the last 12 minutes of play in the first period, and then you have a bad icing, just kind of going for a pass that you didn't need to be going for, kinda coming out of your own zone, leads to an icing with about 10 seconds left, and then you lose the faceoff. You allow there to be traffic in front of Hannah Murphy, and all of a sudden, 5.5 seconds left, Vancouver scores, and now the momentum is completely shifted, right? You go from not allowing them to get a shot on goal in 12 minutes to they have scored on you with 5.5 left. They have a ton of momentum going into the locker room. You have to kinda sit with that now, for 15 minutes while that intermission plays, and then you've got to come back out and get going. And to their credit, they did do a good job of getting going again after that. You're able to tie the game up. But then again, second Vancouver goal, it's an off of another icing. And I will say this one, it's a little, ticky tack on the icing call. Like it's a close, like, all right, this could go either way. But you get this icing call, and again, you lose the faceoff. You allow them to get a ton of bodies net front right away off the draw. And it's a 2-on-1. Alex Carpenter is the player back defending. It's not an ideal situation. Like, where are your defenders? Where is your D in that scenario? You have 2 Vancouver forwards against, obviously still a very good player, someone who could definitely play defense as a forward in Alex Carpenter, but, like, why how does that situation really develop, right? The D just kinda get lost off that draw. They start chasing off to the side and up high, too high in the zone, and then you get that odd player situation down low. So again, not great there. Then you have a couple plays, and you're talking about in the Vancouver one, and also in the Ottawa game, where they're just bad breakouts. You're trying to get out of your zone, and that third goal in the Vancouver game, you just make a bad pass, cross zone, never want to go cross zone, trying to break the puck out. It's a really long pass when you're trying to stretch that diagonally through the zone, gives them a ton of opportunity to step up and intercept the pass. And that is, in fact, what Vancouver does. But then off of that, not only do you have the mistake off the breakout, but then you have bodies back. And Karvinen is able to somehow sit in the middle of 4 Torrent players and just hit away at the rebound until she finally scores on Hannah Murphy. It's just like a weird situation watching it back. I had to watch this one back so many times because you have 4 players back all surrounding her within stick's length of Karvinen, and none of them take away her stick, and none of them decide to body her up just to give Hannah Murphy an opportunity to get a glove down on top of that puck and freeze it. And those are just mental mistakes, right? It's the breakout pass, doing something that's a risky play. You're not really taught to do that. You never want to be sending it diagonal through the zone like that. And then on the other, and then on once you've made the turnover, it's just everybody kind of standing around being like, okay, are you going to take them? Are you going to take them? And then just nobody ends up taking them. And you just allow a player to get 3 shots at a rebound point blank on Hannah Murphy. And you just don't help out your goalie. And that kind of continued into the Ottawa game with the turnovers and stuff like that. Those are things that are fixable. They're just mental errors like we talked about. They're lapses in judgments in the moment, but it is stuff that, this demonstrates when you're in a league like the PWHL, when you are playing against the best players in the world, when you make mistakes like that, there's a good chance that the other team is going to capitalize on them. And you can't always count on them making mistakes to allow you back into the game later. And I think that's what ultimately happened in that Vancouver game was Vancouver just didn't really make mistakes. They never really forced anything, but they didn't make mistakes, but they made sure to capitalize on your mistakes, and you end up losing that game. And so it's one where I think the Torrent I've been playing really well. They've been generating more offense. Players like Jesse Eldridge have gotten going. We'll talk about her later. There's been lots of positive developments everywhere. But when I look at those last 2 games, I can't help but wonder, yeah, is the Olympic factor creeping in there? What causes you to have so many just, mental errors and to struggle with that part of the game where you just weren't before in those final 2 games? And yeah, it as we talked about earlier, it costs you that wiggle room.
I am interested, Dylan. As you mentioned, like and I do imagine a good amount of folks who have been watching the torrent now know, and if they don't know, this league is too good. As you mentioned, it's literally loaded with talent. Yeah, you don't have enough teams yet, and who knows when the league will get to that point. But even then, as you were talking about, as we look to the Olympics, like the collegiate players are really showing out here in the Olympics on the like
Yeah.
proverbial greatest stage of all. Who knows when the league will ever get to that point where there is like the bottom feeders, so to say, right? The teams who are kind of in that struggle mode. I do wonder because you mentioned it, like the fixable issues. When you look at the torrent, how many of their issues or things that are consistent, right? Because some nights it's, you can have a bad night. there are the times where someone just doesn't have it, so to say. You throw that out, like the consistent trends. How much of that for Seattle is fixable? Is something that you say, hey, you need, let's just get through the Olympic break. Let's just get back home. You, you know, I don't want to say that. I don't want to jinx anything. So I will leave my prediction in my bald head. But so and so wins the wins gold. It's done. Now it's focus on the Walter Cup, right? How much of that is, whatever they're working on in practice right now? It's like, you know, how much of it's fixable, and how much of it are you like, hey, I don't know if this is something that you can knock off before, that final push in March.
Yeah, I think most of it's fixable. I think that is something that they have, that's gonna benefit them. Like, everything I just talked about, those are mistakes that you don't have to ever make again, right?
Mhm.
Taking a risky pass with 10 seconds left in a period and it goes for icing, you just don't have to do that again. Just take the safe, easy pass. The couple failed breakouts that they had that led to goals in those last 2 games, just don't make those dangerous passes. Like, they're dangerous passes. It's just sometimes you're just in the swing of things and you're just not thinking and you're just like, "Oh, let me try this," right? Just, play it safe next time, right? And you avoid those scenarios, and almost everything else then ends up okay for you, right? Like, you're talking about games where the Torrent controlled the pace of play for the vast majority of it. They had the offensive zone time that you'd be looking for, and that, I'm sure Steve O'Rourke and the rest of the staff was happy with. They did a great job in those games, except for just making those few mental errors that all of a sudden end up in the back of your net. And so I think that makes it fixable. These are not like unfixable problems, that cause you to take dangerous chances or risky passes, things like that. You don't always have to feel like you're pressing for offense. The other thing though is I think when you just look at like the top players on this team from like a scoring perspective, I think obviously Hillary Knight, Alex Carpenter, Hannah Bilka, they've been putting up good numbers. It's not like they haven't been, but I do think having the Olympics behind them will allow them to kind of hit that next level. And then all of a sudden, you're going to hopefully be able to have two true scoring lines. Whereas through the last little bit of the season there, it felt like that second line was really stepping up and becoming the top line for the Torrent. Serdachny, Eldridge, Gosling, they were all really pushing. Obviously, Jesse Eldridge has the goal scoring streak
Mhm.
in their final 3 games of that sequence, right? Julia Gosling continues to pile up points, and play very well, and so I think getting that Team USA Olympic line kind of going again and not having to think about the Olympics, that can just solely focus on getting this team to the playoffs. I think all of a sudden you're gonna have 2 lines capable of scoring, you know, somebody on each line can put the puck in the net at least once a game, and that's something that not really any other team in the PWHL can say. And I think, yeah, outside of maybe Minnesota, I think, is the only other team that can kinda do that and roll a
Mm.
true, like, top 6 out there where everyone is dangerous.
Yeah,
So, yeah, I know, their scoring numbers have been crazy, but, like, the
it's
Torrent have that.
insane.
Yeah, the Torrent have that ability. They have the players with the skill to do that, and so I think just once they continue to build chemistry with one another and they don't have any other distractions, I think they're gonna be able to hit that level, and that's gonna help out the team a ton, and you won't feel like you need to be pressing for offense as much and then finding yourselves in situations where you maybe make that dangerous pass and it results in something negative for you. So, at least that's my perspective on it. I don't know kinda where you're at with it all.
Yeah, no, like, I was just thinking about this because I'm looking at, like, some of the numbers here, and you could look at it this way. I try to not be super, like, well, and I think, what we do in terms of covering these teams, it's you don't look at just the record and that's the definition of a team, right? You could be like, "Oh, the Torrent are in 8th. They suck." I don't think that's realistic. It is interesting to look at some of the 5-on-5 numbers, like their goals against. It's kind of weird to think that with the play of Hannah Murphy, Corinne Schroeder when she's played, and the talent of the decor, like to think that you've got the worst 5-on-5 goals against percentage, goals against per game in the league. That's not great. I don't like
Yeah.
that. But in terms like, I just think with the level of talent you've got on your team, and as you mentioned, with a common goal for what, uh, 6 6 of your players currently,
Mhm.
away not right now competing in Italy, like, it's understandable, and when one of them is playing in her final Olympics ever, one of the greatest players to touch the ice ever, it's understandable that there will be distractions. Um, I just think there's too many positives for the Torrent, you know. They're not dealing with a bad facility situation, with
Right.
Climate Pledge and KCI. The Climate Pledge crowds have been great. They've talked about it consistently. The quote that Lexia Gia put out after I think it was the Toronto game. I'm gonna keep saying Toronto and get people upset. Where she was like, so I don't remember. I still get notifications about it from this day. People are still liking it about how you feel the Seattle crowd in force at the home games. Um, you know, you've got Hannah Murphy and how well she's played and how she's consistent. The amount of times I go out into the KCI, like anywhere at KCI after a practice, and she's already looking at film, like study, like
Mhm.
w- you know, I just think there's too much talent. There's too much work ethic in this team. There's too many positives to think that they're going to finish 8th. Again, I don't like the idea of pushing it to the final month. Maybe after the Olympics, I feel better because, as you mentioned, it's kind of like a half split, right? We're not
Yeah.
even to the halfway point in terms of games played. Um, it's hard for me to be any doom and gloom yet. I'm just not ready to get there um, with this team. It's not great. There have been some games where like the Ottawa game was brutal, a brutal way to
Yeah.
go into the break, just because it felt like really. I think in the first part of the third period, I was like, okay, they got it. They're gonna
Mhm.
push through and you know and find a way to close this thing out. And then you watch the final few minutes, and it's just kind of truly unraveling, like truly meltdown esque, and you're like, wow, okay, this is bad. Like, get to the Olympics, don't think about this,
Yeah.
come back and hit the reset button. Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. I have too many positives in my head with this roster to worry about their current situation being how this season plays out in its entirety, if that all makes sense.
Yeah, no, I totally feel that way. I feel the same way. Like it very much feels like, and I know, yeah, we've kind of talked about all, like everything that's gone wrong for the team so far in the podcast, not any of the positives for the first half of the season, of which there have been many. But yeah, it feels like, and I guess what I would want people to take away from listening to this so far has just been, it feels more so that they've gotten in their own way than they haven't
Right,
been good enough. And I think that, like, that's a big difference in that. This is not a team that is low on skill. It's not a team that's, has a bad coaching staff. It's not a team that has bad facilities, like you say, or that there's just something wrong with them. It's just a team that, for a variety of reasons, including being an expansion team where there was very few players who had ever played with each other before, there's just been a lot of things that have kind of gotten in their way of being able to achieve greatness. And I think that a lot of those things are gonna not be as large a factor once this Olympic break is over and they get back to playing. I think that it's going to allow them the ability to come together and start looking like the team that we know that they can be, and that they have certainly shown in flashes, and we're starting to show more and more as the season was building and continuing on there. So I do think that there is a lot of positives to continue to look forward to, including those home crowds. I mean, that was certainly one of the things that I had on my list of, positives for the first half of the season has just been the response from Seattle to having this professional women's team has been absolutely incredible. And we all knew that that opening night crowd was going to be large, and it of course was record setting at the time. It's since been broken by DC, but a different Washington. But
love it.
yeah, we've then continued to see crowds that have been exceptionally large for professional women's hockey when you're talking about PWHL and everything, non-tournament games, right? Non-Olympic style games in North America. We're seeing exceptionally large crowds in Seattle. They're really fun crowds. I hear nothing but good things from the people that have been in those crowds. I think the vibe has been fun, even though the team hasn't always won, and sometimes the games have been low scoring. Everybody's still having a good time. Heard so much about how welcoming and inviting the atmosphere has been for these games, and I do want to credit the PWHL and the Seattle Torrent for that, helping to establish that, but also just all the Torrent fans out there for establishing that. So many people have talked to me about saying like, "Look, I I'm a hockey fan or I've been wanting to get into hockey and going to an NHL game, there's a lot there and there's a lot of different personalities that'll surround you in the stands there, and not all of them are good.
Right.
And with the torrent, they don't feel that way. They feel like they can go there, they can be themselves, they feel welcomed and invited, and that they are part of something at these games. And I think that that is a huge, huge positive for not just the Seattle Torrent, but the PWHL, because Seattle was going to be an important market for the league. It was one they wanted to be in,
Mhm.
and so far everything has just gone perfect as far as the amount of people going, and then the people who are going wanting to continue to go, feeling good about going, and, in theory, bringing and inviting more people into that space. So I think, before, like, getting into the team itself and the players and everything, just the thing that's impressed me the most over the first half of the season has really just been the fan base and the response from everybody for this team.
100%. I mean, again, as someone who covers the other women's sports teams in the city and has made that a priority, like, I uh, when I broke the news in April, March, I don't know. Even last year's turnover tour game feels like years ago at this point.
You know?
Um, there were a lot of comments from folks, and obviously, I'm sure some of it was anger from cities who weren't going to get the expansion teams. I understand that. I think there are cities who are very deserving. That could be a whole other thing we do in an episode, right? Is what
Mhm.
when we get to expansion, when the league decides how many teams they want to expand to next year. Um, was that Seattle doesn't deserve it, which is I think that is just emotion,
Ridiculous, yeah.
and Seattle I can't support it, and do I wish that some of the crowds were better for some of the teams? Yeah. I mean, some of the rain games, they play in Lumen, so it's tough when you're in a building that holds 68,000, right? The storm games are always great. Like the energy is great in that building. It probably helps because it is an arena, so all the sound reverberates. Um, but it's never been a shock, right? I mean, it's not like it's Seattle of all places. Come on. Like, what did you think? How did you think they were going to support, another women's team? I get it. It's a busy city. It's a very busy sports landscape. There's a lot to do, but yeah, it's been great to see people come out. People who maybe didn't watch hockey, the folks who, were getting into heated rivalry and maybe they don't want to get into the NHL space and they say, oh, I'm for the PWHL space, the personality. I mean, there's a ton of personality on this team, though. There is no shortage of that, So there's just a lot of things that are going Seattle's way, and if hopefully we are in the final month of the season and they're rolling, and we can expect playoff crowds. Can you imagine playoff crowds? I mean, I still think about the NHL playoff crowds, and how
Mhm.
the buzz was around here for that, and I don't mean to stir up controversy, right? But a lot of folks have said, and at times I have said it, the PWHL crowds and an atmosphere is more lively than an NHL crowd. There's maybe a bit more joy, stuff like that, whatever, how you want to describe it. So just playoff hockey and truly like I know Olympics is best on best, but it feels like the PWHL is best on best with the limited number of teams at this point.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, at least in terms of just off the ice stuff, like you're mentioning, yeah, it's been great. I've loved it. It's wonderful. Players have been great. I know that the team itself has been working with some things, people not happy with maybe not enough jerseys, merch, stuff like that. But
Mhm.
I think a lot it all comes down to and this isn't, people are upset about this, but they didn't know that this team would be loved this much. This franchise would be loved this much. And so now it's trying to catch up. So no, it's great.
Yeah.
I miss it. It's tough that we're going to be gone for so long, but glad that the first game out of the break is at home. That'll be nice. So they don't have to go back on the road and be away like that one stretch after the first homestand. So long and convoluted, but yeah,
No,
no, it's all been really positive to me.
it really has been, and, yeah, you mentioned PWHL feels like best on best. It's a smaller league than the amount of teams at the Olympics. There's
Right.
ten
Yeah.
nations at the Olympics in the women's tournament. There's only 8 PWHL teams, so in some ways it is, more so that way. But yeah, it feels like, yeah, the few roadblocks that they've hit so far were the things that were to be expected given how fast this all came together. Once the PWHL decided to expand to Seattle, they had to go through the process of, coming up with the team name, going through all of those things. Like merch just takes time. It takes time to print the t-shirts and make the jerseys and get all that stuff rolled out. And they had bigger things to worry about, such as where's the team playing, where is it practicing, can we secure these spaces, working with the different ownership groups of those places, and figuring all of that stuff out. So, and putting together a staff, on the team side of things. They needed a front office, they needed a coaching
Hmm.
staff, they needed to have players. There was a lot of things that had to go into this in a very short amount of time.
Right.
And I think the fact that it has gone as smooth as it has, I think is another kind of credit to just all the individuals involved from the top down on being able to make this whole thing happen. As for stuff that's more on the ice and what's
Hmm.
been positive through the first half of the season, I think we can talk about some of the individual players in this one, and I think we have to start with, of course, Julia Gosling, who this has been her breakout season in the PWHL so far, and breakout season internationally as well, as she has 3 goals through 3 games for the Canadian squad over there in Italy at the moment, leading that team in goals and tied for the team lead in points, which is no small feat when you're talking about Canada, although this year's Canadian team, a little tough there. But Julia Gosling, 12 points in 14 games for the Torrent, 6 goals, 6 assists, and really announced herself that opening game against Vancouver. 2 goals, plays exceptionally well, and that really hasn't stopped as the season's gone on. She has been the Torrent's most consistent player, in my opinion, all season long, and she's really kind of taken over as the one who has had to carry the scoring load.
It is interesting in that regard. Like, I I don't know if I really expected that from her. Uh, I was you think of the USA line cliche, right? Just okay. They're gonna do a lot of things, and they are right now in the Olympics. I mean, good grief. It feels like every time they play, I have to kind of be awake the fact that that's going on. Um, and then, even after the Vancouver game, right, to open things up, you see the opening goal, it's kind of fluky. You see the lead shot, which what we had talked about in the preseason, and then even
Mhm,
after that. But just seeing the variety of ways she's gotten involved, like there's some net front tip in, which I didn't expect, but she's not a small player, right?
mhm.
It does make me wonder, and again, not to get too ahead of yourself, but like when you look at next year, you have to wonder you how do you keep a Julia Gosling, right? Because I imagine you want to keep a Hannah Bilka. I'm gonna call her Julia Bilka. Nope, there's not that many of those. Uh, a Bilka, a Gosling, like different players, but wingers that I'm sure you want to hold on to, right? Um, it has been really cool, just see the, passing her point total from last year, passing her goal total. And this is a player that's what, only in her
Second
second
season.
year, which is crazy to think about. She's my age, that's right. She's only 24. Um, yeah, as you mentioned, it might not be this the Olympics, a lot of stuff that can happen that
Mhm.
Canada wants this year, but especially with Pooh being out. But hey, I mean, if you're Julia, and again, if it doesn't go well, then I'm sure that would play a mind. But can you imagine coming back to the Torrent and being like, "Hey, the confidence it would give you, hey, I led Team Canada in scoring."
Mhm.
Like, keep doing that, just and then if you're Daniel Serdachny, maybe there is less worry to if you're her, and I'm sure I wouldn't maybe say that so much. I'm sure she still wants to get some points because, as we've talked about, the point numbers haven't really been there for her. But
Mhm.
it's just feed your wingers in Julia Gosling and Jesse Eldridge, who have been tearing things up. You don't need to score the goals if you've got two different players who score goals differently, with a hard shot and someone who can get in that front, get out in open space. Like that, can you, if that's the best case scenario, right? You've got the
Yeah,
USA line and that line,
I
like,
know.
that's terrifying. That is terrifying. Um, yeah, no, it's been really fun. I've really enjoyed watching what Julia's been able to do, and as I've kind of, maybe alluded to with forgetting that it was just her second year, it's crazy that she's 24. I would have, for some reason, thought that she had been here, been around longer, you know, but it's another reason why the positivity part, like, you see someone like that, you see the confidence you can build playing Olympics hockey. I don't think it's gonna be that bad. It should not be as bad as it's been losing in results wise for the Torrent down the stretch. She
Yeah.
is a reason for that.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And yeah, I mean, a player who, we're talking about her being in her second season, already passed her goal and point total in 30 games last year in Toronto. Like this has been her breakout year. Somebody that was, talked about coming into the league. Um, people knew her. They knew that she was, potentially going to be legit. Didn't have a lot of opportunity last year in Toronto.
Right.
Like you look at like the ice time jump that she's gotten this year in Seattle versus what she was getting last year in Toronto, and you're talking about in some cases like a 7 minute a night difference. And just the ability to then also play with players like Serdachny, Eldridge, and before that, Hillary Knight and Alex Carpenter. Yeah, it's gonna be a big difference in the quality of your line mates when you're not, on a third line somewhere. But yeah, it's been a great breakout year for her. She just does so many things well. The skill was on display through training camp. We saw that. It was kind of
Right.
on display last year in the postseason for the Scepters as well. She had 3 goals in 4 games for them. Then it kind of felt like that was, the start of okay, here she goes. But you could tell that like right away. I said during training camp, best shot on the team, right? Team
Yep.
that includes Alex Carpenter and Hillary Knight, that Julie Gosling's got the best shot. But just it's not just the shot like you talked about, it's the ability to play net front, it's the ability to understand situations in the offensive zone, ability to understand how to set up her line mates too, right?
Mm,
Regardless of which line she's been on, she's been able to make some nice plays. You look at the breakaway goal for Jesse Eldridge in the Vancouver game. I have to specify
right.
because Jesse Eldridge had many breakaway goals during that last stretch of the season. But it was the Vancouver game where she finds and sees Jesse Eldridge. She recognizes that Vancouver's D is pressing up in the offensive zone. They're being aggressive. She gets the puck along the half boards and she sees that Jesse Eldridge starts breaking up the ice, and she just a beautiful pass, tape to tape, perfectly
Mhm.
hits Jesse Eldridge in stride. Eldridge doesn't have to do anything to receive that pass. It's not in her skates. It's not too far in front or behind her. She can just receive it and immediately start looking at the goaltender and figuring out what she wants to do. And that is just beautiful playmaking from somebody that, yeah, predominantly we think of as a goal scorer, but you look at her numbers, 6 assists to go with the 6 goals. She really is a well-rounded offensive threat, just kind of across the board. So, yeah, I it would be tough to see a world in which the Torrent don't have Julia Gosling for longer. And through an expansion process, I would think. But yeah, just really, really solid player there. We could talk about Jesse Eldridge because all of a sudden, Charles, we talked about her before, I think even on the last podcast about, okay, this is somebody that there's been rumblings around the league, maybe even. Does Seattle need to make a move there? What's not quite working with Jesse Eldridge in Seattle? And I came on this podcast, and I am going to pat myself on the back here. And I said, look, her shooting percentage is unbelievably low right now. It's well below her career average. She's just been unlucky. Just give her a little bit of time, and that shooting will regress up to the mean, right? In a positive direction. And sure enough, she comes out 3 goals, 3 games, and just looks like a world beater, taking over games. Again, I mentioned all of them breakaway goals, like the ability for her to recognize situations defensively and when she can take those chances and start getting up the ice and use her speed through the neutral zone to attack other teams. I mean, some of them, is it the Toronto one, I think, where it wasn't even like originally a breakaway. She just beats the
Oh, right.
defenders so
Yeah.
much that she just leaves them behind. And it's just incredible play from a player that, you know, otherwise normally in the offensive zone, right? You're talking about net front player. That's her job, screen the goaltender, be there for rebounds, those kinds of things. But she's been able to showcase her speed, her offensive instincts in being able to jump up and create these situations for herself, and then of course her shot to be able to finish on all of these opportunities. All of them, I think, have been high left corner too. Um, so,
Oh,
maybe I
yeah.
shouldn't say that and give that information away to any goaltenders out there, but they've been so high corner
Hmm.
and, like, perfectly placed there that I don't know, even if you knew it was coming, that you'd be able to stop it.
Yeah, no, it's been that is something, and I was gonna wonder if you had any thoughts on that. Was people looking at the trade that Vancouver and Ottawa made, and they're like, "Oh, what does Seattle need to make a move?" And truthfully, I'm like, what do you move? What do you move, and what are you hoping to get? Because arguably, you've got what you want on this roster. It's just making it shake. Yeah, with Jesse, it's been pretty fascinating because I had a friend come to um one of the games, and she was saying, "Oh, she's got bad body language," talking about Jesse, and I was like, "Really? Like, I don't know." And she was like, "Oh, she seems like maybe she needs just like to perk up," and I was like, I don't know, like, she seems pretty good when we're in practice and everything, and, and I was like, "Oh, well, she's kind of on a scoring drought," and she's like, "Oh, maybe that's why." I don't know. She's like, she seems to be holding it down, and so to see this is great, as you mentioned, like, it's not all one thing, none of these players have been relying on one thing, um, it's just really cool to see that, you know, um it kinda come together. In some of these games, it feels like she's the only one, which is not great. You'd like to see
Yeah.
more of that. But, again, it goes back to that. I mean, for someone who maybe could help with Canada, I don't know. I wonder what goes on with that.
You gotta wonder.
You know, uh, see how they handle things going forward. This is just the Dunk on Canada podcast.
Yeah,
Um, but,
they've
you
earned it.
know, to have these players like she's got a game score that's higher than Hannah Bilka so far, which is kind of
Mhm,
funny. It's Gosling, Knight, Carpenter, then Jesse Eldridge. Um, just another one of the like so many players with some not so many, but some players with momentum coming into the Olympics and or will come out of it with some momentum. And for others, you hope it's a reset, right? Jesse Eldridge comes, as you mentioned, with the goal streak. Maybe something's clicking. Maybe she's more settled in. Because it is a real thing. I know some folks discredit it. It's like just being I see I get that excited too when we're talking about Jesse Eldridge. Um, just comfort being in a new place, feeling comfortable with certain line mates, right? Like it's been great to see. You know, like and then that's what you mentioned the playmaking uh between the two wingers and Gosling and Eldridge. That's something that Steve O'Rourke talked about to us when we did the
mhm.
first 10 games in is Gosling finding her own play and being able to set up her teammates. So being to set up a Serdachny, which maybe hasn't happened yet, but she obviously has a lot of responsibility in her role currently. And to set up an Eldridge to be where they're at now. So yeah, no, it's fun to kind of see the pieces together because Eldridge, I think, was one of the players I was least familiar with, unfortunately, even though she had great point numbers with the Sirens last year. I was kind of like, what are you like? I know the top line. I know a bit of the Gosling. I know she's a lot of people's pick to click. I know Sir Daphne because she was effectively the first player they signed. Jesse Eldridge, I don't know and it's been kind of
Mhm.
fun to see her, maybe uh to learn her story a bit more because yeah, I mean, again, you get these two top lines clicking. I don't know if there's a better two top lines in the league. I don't know if that's outrageous. Obviously, again, Minnesota is scoring points like crazy. But I like I don't know. I don't know, Dylan. I feel like
It's
it'd be hard.
I think so too. I think so too. It's the power of the pink scrunchie, man. That's what it is
Should I
with
wear one?
Jesse Eldridge. I think we all should, to be fair, to be frank with you. I think it would be good for all of us. Um, you mentioned Hannah Bilka, the fact that Jesse Eldridge does have that higher game score than Hannah Bilka, and I think that obviously Hannah Bilka has had a great start to the season as well. Great run right now over there in Italy at the Olympics as well for Team USA and has certainly won over a large just about everybody in the fan base, right? Anna Bokic is one of the most exciting players in the PWHL when the puck's on her stick. You know that anything's possible. The speed at which she can move with the puck on her stick and maintain control. It's something that only a few players in this league in the world can do. But I do think that one of the things that doesn't get talked about a lot with Hannah Bilka is some of the limitations she's had with her playmaking, and
Mm,
I don't know that it's maybe limitations is too much too strong of a word, but I think that we have seen um, situationally she has been better sometimes other than more than other times, and this is all my really poor way of saying that she still doesn't have a 5-on-5 assist. Right? Like,
right.
she is this elite playmaker, somebody who has elite vision, elite puck skills, can move with speed. All 5 of her assists this season have been on the power play. We have not seen her actually do that at 5-on-5, and it's not for lack of trying, and she has made good plays at 5-on-5. It's not like she's just a power play merchant. All of her goals have been at 5-on-5. But I am wondering if the move up to the top line with Alex Carpenter and Hillary Knight, and now especially after they're having this Olympic stretch and run with Team USA where they're all playing together, if we're going to start seeing more of that 5-on-5 production from Hannah Bilka and seeing some of that playmaking and vision and exciting highlight reel moments from her happening a little bit more regularly, not just when the Torrent have the player advantage.
Right. Yeah, and that's another thing in a different way than Eldridge, but comfort, right? Maybe it is the comfort of being next to two players that you play against the best in the world against. She's a very interesting player. I was, for a while through the first maybe the first homestand, I was kind of like, hey, obviously she's young, so it feels hard to me to put more pressure on her, right? But
Yeah.
there's an expectation here, right?
Mhm.
Like being at the expansion draft party at Rough and Tumble, the loudest cheer came when they took Hannah Bilka. I think a lot of people were really excited for that. And we already knew about signing Hillary Knight, so that was, kind of check. But the expansion draft, it was, and even I was looking at the list, and you got to obviously factor in Vancouver making picks. I was like, you get Hannah Bilk, and we're good. Like, I don't care. That should be your top pick. Um, yeah, that number because you brought that up. I think one of the last home games
Mhm.
we were at, and I was like, wow, that is interesting. And so for that to continue, yeah, that's another thing to me. I think it goes back to comfort. You know what I mean? You're playing with two players that there's the somewhat infamous now screenshot of Hannah Bilka as a young player with a medal in her hand and next to Hillary. Like
Yep.
I think yeah, just playing with that line will give you some comfort and you know, you really hope this line in particular, if this line can come out and kind of wreak havoc on some teams, fresh out of the break, I think it sets the table for a lot of things. You're able to get more. going early on, right? Because what has it been for Seattle? They don't score a lot of 5-on-5, and they don't score early.
Yeah.
So you get that, you don't have to chase the game, you don't put more pressure on your D. I think it can open up a lot of things for this team, which would be great because, then it's you talk about the skill of this team, you can see that maybe more on display. You're not worrying about more things defensively, defensive responsibility, right? So, like, still thinking about the Alex Carpenter being the lone defender back. That's hey, love Alex Carpenter.
Yeah.
Shouldn't have to put her in that situation.
Right. Right. No, and it is interesting to, it's not kind of just Hannah Bilka with the power play production. So, Hannah Bilka, 5 of her 9 points have been on the power play. For Alex Carpenter, 4 of her 9 points have been on the power play. And for Hillary Knight, 5 of her 10 points have been on the power play. And it shows that they have really been the power play core of this team because outside of them, and that's a combined, 14 points on the power play from the three of them, you have for the entire rest of the team combined 3 points on the power play. That's 2 for Julia Gosling and 1 for Jessie Eldridge, right? Like, the power play has been your top line, and your top line has, half of their production is coming only on the power play, and so it does feel like that's a place for the Torrent where, if they're able to produce a little bit more 5 on 5 or, uh, conversely, if you're able to get that second line to start producing on the power play and you get your second unit going a little bit, then you start talking about, yeah, the Torrent not having to force things in games. They're in a better spot score-wise. They're really middle of the road so far on the power play. Obviously, the production from that top line is doing a lot to
Mm,
help out there.
mm, mm.
But it hasn't been a disaster or anything on the power play. But it is kind of stark that you do have one line that has been exclusive 5-on-5 production, and then the other line where, yeah, you're talking about half, or in like Hannah Bilka's case, more than half of all of their points this year only occurring on the power play. It's kind of interesting that you have such a split there. It's one where I also, though, go, it's been 14 games. It's just not a huge sample size. Stuff like that can just happen, and it wouldn't surprise me if at the end of the season we look back on it and through 30 games, they're more in line with each other, right? The top line gets more 5-on-5 scoring, and the second line gets more power play opportunities, and they get more scoring there. So, I'm not willing to say that it's like a red flag or it's anything that Torrent fans need to be worried about, but it is a situation that I think is worth monitoring, and it'll be interesting to see how it
Right.
plays out through the rest of the year.
Yeah, I would definitely wanna see how that develops 'cause, I think there were high hopes once they figured the power play out, when they have that stretch of games, it was 2 games, the New York and the Ottawa games back to back at home. You're like, "Okay, power play's fixed. We're all
Yep.
good." And then it's the results have not been great since then, in that regard. I'd have to look at the numbers, but I feel like you start to wonder if the penalty kill is your best option in terms of special teams because of the jailbreak goal. Thank you, Lexi Gia.
Yeah. Oh, and I was gonna say, and I guess we got to speed up here a little bit. There's a lot of stuff that we had to catch up on here. But for the final, like, kind of, positives, things that have been really working well for the Torrent this year. You can't have that conversation about what's been working without talking about that third line. Lexia Gia, who you just mentioned, has 3 goals on the season and has been, their best penalty killer, in my opinion, so far this year, and has been somebody that they can always count on to just go out there, have a good energy shift. If momentum's swinging in the other team's favor, she can go out there, go strong on the forecheck, kind of disrupt what they're doing. And her line mates have also been doing that, with Grant Mentis and Snodgrass. That third line has been pretty instrumental, it feels like, particularly early on this year, keeping the Torrent in some games. Like, there was some rough patches through the
Right.
early part of the year, and the only time they were able to have some consistent zone time was when that third line was out there grinding.
Right. Which is pretty crazy to think about. I mean, there was that stretch of games too where it felt like they were the brunt of your offense, the majority of your offense, which not maybe what you'd expect from a group of Lexia Gia, Michaela Grant Mantis, and Natalie Snodgrass. But I mean, they made it work. I mean, they're not a soft team. I mean, at one point they were doing so well. I think towards the end here that O'Rourke split them up and put Agia down on the fourth line to help kind of spark the fourth line. And it was like, wow, okay.
Yeah.
You move Brooke Bryant up and you hope, yeah, that they can figure it out. Um, that they're a lot. They've surprised me. I will admit. I think we obviously
Same.
have talked about them for the course of the year, but I wasn't sure what to expect with this group. Like I knew Agia brought good energy. You know, I could see that on display when they were here for the takeover tour. I knew about Bucky. I know there's some skill there. And Natalie Snodgrass, I was just kind of like, you got a cool name. Like we'll figure it out. But no, I mean, it's hard to they feel kind of like what a maybe with more skill than a traditional fourth line, but they feel like what a fourth line should be doing.
Mhm.
Um, but so I maybe that has me wondering more about what you've thought of the fourth line because you know they're a fourth line, they don't play that many minutes, but you know, not to be negative, but you look at the game score and the players on it are effectively your fourth liners, Dylan. And Brooke
Yeah.
Bryant is in there. She's a few points clear of them, but and again, I don't know how much you want to harsh on a fourth line because it's the fourth line, but you know, it is kind of interesting. I would have I would have not expected to see the third line doing this well, and you get little to nothing from that fourth line. But yeah, I mean they play a good physical. I think you might have said this with the third line, but when they play like that, they're like a coach's favorite line.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No question. Um, yeah, no, I think, yeah, they've been fantastic, and yes, on the reverse side of things, the 4th line has really struggled this year. I think that there's been reasons for that. I mean, you look at them and they're being centered by Jenna Buglioni, who has had multiple injuries already this season or situations that have kind of disrupted her ability to kind of come into this league clean and start developing. Already just a difficult task for anybody making the jump from college to the PWHL. It's a huge leap in terms of the quality of competition that you're facing and everything. But then to also be thrown into an expansion team where, frankly, there's not gonna be a ton of hand-holding for the rookies, particularly the skaters, because everybody's new and everybody's trying to figure it out. It's a lot easier when you're a rookie drafted going to an established team, established leadership group, coaching staff. They know that the veterans already know what's up. They can spend a little bit more time with you. That hasn't really been the case for the young players on this team. And you look at the fourth line, and it is rookies, right? Like
Yeah,
for the most part, Brooke
yeah,
Bryant being the exception of that group. I just don't know that there's been the ability to kind of develop them the way you traditionally would young players making that big leap from college into the PWHL. And then, like, yeah, with Jenna Buglioni specifically, on top of that, you have the concussion and the injury in the first game and all of that kind of stuff, and it does get in the way of that even more. And so I think that there's been bigger fires for the coaching staff to be like managing and putting out with this team and just trying to get everything set up and going. And unfortunately, that's meant that the fourth line kind of has become an afterthought, it feels like, and including in games, just in the fact that like we've seen games where they get like 6 minutes. Like
right.
that is not a lot of time, and it's certainly not going to be a lot of time for you to feel like you can, build confidence and kind of let the game slow down and really adjust to it because you're just not out. You're only out there 2 or 3 shifts. I just don't think that's enough time for that to happen.
Yeah. No, it's yeah, it goes back to like how much how much criticism and true analysis can you put on a fourth line, especially in some of these games where you're pushing late, right? And it's just yeah, you kind of don't worry about it, right? It's just like,
Yeah.
hey, unfortunately, you have to take the seat. We have to put these other guys first.
Yeah, yeah, they haven't been playing with multi-goal leads and the kinds of situations that would allow you to be in those spots. The other thing that I think has surprised me, Charles,
Hmm.
has been the blue line. And again,
Yep.
I hate I guess that we saved, like, some of this, stuff for the end, but, um, going into this year, I thought that the Torrent had, on paper, perhaps the best blue line in the PWHL, right? And we talked about this, RJ and I talked about this. It felt like I talked about this with everybody. And I still think that they can have that, but I don't think that it is played like the best blue line in the PWHL. I would argue it's potentially at times looked like the worst blue line in the PWHL. Obviously, it's playing defense more so than any other position relies on communication and the psychic connection with your partner out
Oh,
there to just kind of understand each other's tendencies, to have that chemistry, to have the awareness of in these situations, you're going to handle that and I'm going to handle this, and we don't have to say anything on the ice.
right.
Right? And then when things break down, you do have that communication between each other where there's only gonna be time to maybe get 1 or 2 words out, and you have to be on the same page about what that's going to mean. And I think that with them being an expansion team, with it being a group where there wasn't a ton of history between these players, that transition has been more difficult for them than I kinda thought it was going to be. It's one of those, in hindsight, I'm not surprised just because of how much goes into the position and how tough it is and how difficult a expansion process can be for everybody, and but, I do think that if the Torrent have had a weak point this season, it has been the blue line and the play in their own zone, with multiple things highlighted, like some of those plays I was talking about earlier, like the D not being there to help out Alex Carpenter off of that draw, or some other instances where, yeah, you have 2 or 3 players back and they just don't physically body somebody up, or they don't take away the stick and they just kinda hang around. But I think that that has been something that they've struggled with, and I would also say within that group, and I promise I'll let you speak on this, Charles.
No,
Like,
it's fair.
give me a minute. While I have the soapbox, uh, I think the 2 players that have actually struggled the most, and this has surprised me the greatest, it's been Caleb Barnes and it's been Emily Brown.
Okay.
2 players that I think, were supposed to be the anchor of this defense, in a lot of ways. I give Tara Lova a little bit of a pass because she's been injured all year, essentially, it feels like, injured or suspended,
Right.
which, the injury you can't do anything about, but I really think Caleb Barnes has struggled. I don't know how much of that was the Olympics impact and everything, but when I watch those plays back, Caleb Barnes was involved in all of them.
Okay.
And it's not something that I was expecting to see, but it is something that I saw, and we know that offensively, she's been around and involved in plays, but the scoring has maybe lagged behind what we're used to from her at the PWHL level, but I think she struggled in her own zone. Again, she's a good player. She can figure it out at any point. Maybe the Olympics will help her do that. But I think the transition has been a struggle for her, and I think it's been a struggle for Emily Brown as well. There's just lots of times where it seems like she's chasing plays a lot. We've talked in the past about kind of how rangy the D can be in their own zone.
Mhm.
They are willing to kind of chase puck carriers high up into the zone or off to the side to the half boards and stuff. And for me, Emily Brown is like the number one person who does that. Megan Carter does that a lot too, but Emily Brown especially has done a lot of, trying to play like man-to-man defense when in hockey, when you're in your own zone, you kinda can't afford to always do that. And so I don't know how much of that is her normal play style, and that's just who she's always been, and the coaching staff is fine with it. But there's been a lot of times where I've noticed breakdowns in the D zone, and I'm just like, "Where were you?" Like, you're on the ice, but you weren't at all, like, in a position to kinda help. You were kinda pulled yourself out of it. So, um, yeah, I think they're both still very good players, and they have the ability to absolutely kind of course correct, but I think that they've struggled with the transition and the expansion process, so to speak, on the player side of things more than most.
Right, and I think, you mentioned just with the blue line in general, we talk about, the expansion part of it and, like, settling in, that part. Yeah, when you talk about the D and how important it is in terms of the pairing, like, that communication, that sort of chemistry being built, yeah, as you mentioned, that's not a shocking thing to see. It's unfortunate because, yeah, I mean, you look at names, at least relative to the PWHL. This is a good deal. This, I almost said D line. Nope, not American football. This is a good blue line. I can unfortunately, and I will try to not keep it long, but I can look at each one of these D and kind of talk about them.
Mhm,
Kayla Barnes. It is funny to see like she drives play a lot. I think some of it is unlucky, unfortunately. She
mhm,
drives play a lot. I think she's finally got her first few points, which is nice. I do wonder as one of the younger defenders for Team USA, and I say younger when there's literal children in college there, but they're quite exceptional. Let's not get anything twisted about that. How much maybe she was thinking about that in her own head. You're a top pairing D here, but she's been playing on the third pairing, I think, with Team USA.
mhm.
So I'm sure you're thinking about that. She does a lot, it kind of with Kayla, it feels like it does feel like a true I joke about the D line. It feels like a um what's the word I'm looking for? Not very rewarding position because she's doing a lot of things that maybe won't show up for her in highlight reels or like again, the first goal in that comeback against the Siren, she drives, I think it was the first goal, one of the 2 to tie it up.
Mhm.
Um, she drives that puck up the ice, and gets it into the position where it finally goes into the net front thing, and then there's all this chaos, but she doesn't get the reward for that. Nobody cares effectively that that puck got a like, I'm sure scouts, uh, the video team and the coaching staff will have seen that, but, like, the fans are
Yeah.
gonna be like, "Oh, look at Kayla Barnes, look what she did," you know? Um, I think there's some mixture with her. It's, some mistakes here. We've talked about the penalties where it's just like, you don't
Mhm.
need to be doing that. That's,
Yeah.
but then there's also some moments where I'm like, this is kind of a tough break for you. I don't think you got the fair end of this. Megan Carter, I mean, I wasn't sure. It's funny enough, she's the second highest D in terms of game score, which is not what I would have thought. Um, Love the physicality, not all the time, I'll say, but, like, it was great to see her get her first goal. Um, it's been interesting to see them kinda put her and Teralova together when Teralova's been healthy. Um, yeah, I don't have too much. I mean, it feels like Megan Carter is very straightforward. She's a physical D.
Yeah.
She's gonna bring that. Anna Wilgren's interesting to me. I thought you were gonna bring her up, because it feels like she covers a lot of ice. It feels
Mhm.
like she's tracking things down. She does a lot of the dirty work that isn't gonna be rewarded necessarily in the stat sheet, or at least to, the more popular stats that somebody will look to. I'm gonna kinda be looking to see what her production, what her game looks like in the second half of this season because she's someone who, if I remember correctly, it's her and Teralova on the second pairing. Sorry, not second pairing, second unit on the power
Mhm.
play. They do the 2D on that second unit. As you
Yeah.
mentioned, it's like, what other forward are you putting out there? Um, I feel like, yeah, there are some games where I'm just kind of like, are you on the ice? Like, oh, there you are. You're further up the ice than maybe the other partner is.
Yeah.
Um, Mariah Keppel feels like she's pretty straightforward. It's like, I don't need to hear from you. You do your job. Emily Brown, I would say the other side of things, I don't see a lot. This is someone who's on your leadership team. Feels like she's taken a couple tough penalties. Um, I do kind of wonder, yeah, how much of the transition's hard, how much of that plays into it, right? Because I would have to look through my lineups, but I feel like she's split time between the top two pairs.
Yeah.
And you kind of wonder, it's like, hey, when is this going to click? Uh, I'm going to keep kind of banging this drum. I've been really impressed for Lindy Lobdell as a rookie.
Mhm.
Uh, doesn't look overwhelmed. We were talking on our Sounder show about a player who went from playing in the MLS to playing in one of the top leagues in the world in Spain. Like, doesn't look overwhelmed. Doesn't Isn't shocked. Like, you go from playing Penn State, and now you're having to deal with these best on best PWHL players. I thought she's filled in real well, and I depending on how many teams come to the league next year, who knows how it would go.
Yeah.
I'd be happy to keep her around, and see what she looks like on a second or third pairing. Um, And then with Terralova, I don't know if I'm homerisming or being, like, biased towards Aneta. I feel like she's gotten a really bad rap this year. I mean, the injury in the first game, the hard hit, which it was cool actually that there was a little interaction at the Olympics between her and Sarah Fillier where she got to apologize and make sure it wasn't on purpose, which, I don't think she meant to take her head out like that.
No.
I imagine the hit was very intentional. The
Yeah.
head, not so much. Um, Otherwise, it's cool to see her when she's on the ice. She's
Mhm.
played great for Czechia in the games I've been able to see.
Yeah.
You know, that's been undeniable, but it's like, yeah, you've dealt with 2 injuries, um, and a suspension, So, um, yeah, it is kind of an interesting hodgepodge with the blue line here, right? Where it's just like I don't think any of you are necessarily playing terrible, but you're not playing as a unit. You're
Yes.
not you don't look together, as you've mentioned, and so with what all but 2 of them still being here, I know Wilgan was on the bubble when they were playing the rivalry series, right? She was getting invites, but she wasn't really playing.
Mhm.
Um, you know, Great to reset. The Emily Brown and Megan Carter, Anna Wilgren, Mariah couple, great to see them maybe kind of start to build things there. Hopefully and start to figure I've yet to come back out. I've been in Florida, not Florida, California. Nope, not Florida. So I'm excited to get back out there and see what they're working on because
Yeah.
as I mentioned earlier, they're still installing some things. So I would just wonder what this practice period will look like for them, and especially the D, because the forwards I'm not so much worried about.
Yeah.
The D, yeah, that's why I was waiting to get to this point because I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah, I feel like this is maybe something that the emphasis should be on if we're looking at the units as a whole.
Yeah, no, it does, and again, it's one of those where, if there has been struggles, like, if you wanna call it struggles, it's understandable why, right? Because it is the position that it requires the most familiarity with your partner, it requires the most amount of communication and everybody being on the same page. There's just so much about it that makes it a really difficult position to play, and going through an expansion process and being kind of thrown together and not having a lot of training camp time or preseason time to be able to build that. And the coaching staff's still just figuring out who to pair with who through all of that, so it's not even like you're necessarily able to start building chemistry and building up that communication. It was really tough assignment for all of these players that they were thrown into here. And yeah, several of them are still playing really well. I'm totally in agreement with you about Abdel. I think she's been fantastic, a great find there. But yeah, it does feel like if there's a weak link for the Seattle Torrent right now, it's probably the blue line, because it certainly hasn't really been goaltending, Charles. Like, the numbers may not be great all the time for the goaltenders, but I think, just to kinda end on them, Hannah Murphy has been absolutely stellar, as a rookie. I think already probably exceeded what everybody thought she could do rookie year. She's probably already played more games than they were anticipating her playing through the first 14 by the time they'd get to the Olympic break. I know certainly for me that's been the case. And,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, and then, Schroeder has, it felt like, really found her game here recently. I think that there was, and this was something that she talked about in various times that we've had the opportunity to talk to her, and that the coaching staff has talked about in relation to all of the goalies, but it always felt like it came up when talking about her. That communication with the D, having some chemistry with the D in front of her, kind of understanding those things. A little bit of a slower start to the season for Corinne Schroeder, but it feels like she's really found her footing here recently, and she's put together some really stellar performances for the Torrent as of late. Again, they haven't all been wins, but that has not been because of her.
No, yeah, well, first with Murphy, yeah, I was not expecting any of this, right? I was thinking, you'll give Corinne Schroeder the lion's share of the games, she'll dominate the starts, we'll get some CJ starts in there and Hannah Murphy, you get to sit around and be the third goalie and hang out.
Yeah.
Uh, um but hey, don't take somebody in the second round if you don't expect them to play, I guess. And I know we got Steve O'Rourke on. I don't know how much of a stretch it would be to try and get Megan Turner and talk about her draft picks, but I mean, hey, not a bad first draft so far for Megan Turner. Yeah, no, totally like I easily. I don't know how many people truly expected Hannah Murphy to come out and contribute as a baseline, let alone look the way you have. Some of the games haven't been great, and that she wasn't going to allow a goal a game the rest of the way. That would have
Yeah,
been unprecedented. That would have been historic, so on and so forth. Um, but you
yeah.
know,
Not Aaron
it,
Frankel.
well, not many people are.
Yeah,
N-
nobody is.
Nobody is. God, yeah, Jesus. Sorry. Yeah. The it is interesting. I go back to mentioning it with the watching film. Like, I know it wasn't so much when they were recently there because their goaltender coach was away with Team Canada for the juniors. So it was funny. The I think it was a Vancouver broadcast I was listening. It was Corinne Schroeder who was leading the goalie drills and had a practice plan mapped out. So I will have to add there's a reason to go to practice. There we go. I gotta write that. That's right. Dang
Yep.
it. Okay. Um, yeah, she mapped the practice out. So that's really fun. But yeah, anyway, my point was Hannah Murphy is always working on things like, obviously all of these athletes have a work ethic, but to see that from a rookie who, you could easily say, hey, I've already had a great year. I've already had a great rookie season. I've done a lot. She wants to get better, and again, to bring it up for the future, I imagine you have to say, hey, how do we keep Hannah Murphy, of your goaltenders, you know, and with Schroeder, I felt like Corinne Schroeder was getting a lot of disrespect early on. There were
Mhm.
some things that weren't great. There was that third goal against Minnesota in the opener where you probably wanted to cover that one up so it doesn't get flipped in. But it felt like she had to absorb a lot of pressure early on because the Torrent have not started out games well. They really haven't. It felt like
Mhm.
they don't score early on, and often they have to like absorb a bunch of pressure from the other team early. And typically that's been on Corinne Schroeder to deal with that. And, I thought she's typically done a great job. Eventually it breaks down. And as you mentioned, as we talked about with some of the defensive issues, it leaves them in a bad spot. Um, but yeah, no, there's been some of these games where I thought she's looked really strong, and I'm sure the confidence is building, right? I think ever since their the shootout win in Toronto, nope, in Hamilton, which close enough.
Yeah.
Like when she gets the shootout win there, you have to go into that situation where you're isolated against one skater. I'm sure that's a big confidence boost. And she's been, they've had her play what against Boston the majority of the games they've played the Fleet.
Mhm.
That's the you're putting her against the best team in the league, and she's looked good. She hasn't
Mhm.
gotten shelled or anything, So, yeah, no, I think the confidence is building, and that'll be huge. Again, add to my list, Dylan, the list of positives for why I
Yep.
think things can break out in this second half is just different players gaining confidence. It's not like everybody else is doing the little green up arrow. Like the player progression isn't going up for everybody, but they're like key players and key spots who I think are putting things together, and a mental reset period where you're not dealing with kind of the wacky schedule. You're in the takeover tour games and you're on the road. um I think a good reset's nice. And so yeah, with Schroeder specifically, and even with CJ, I mean, whenever the time comes,
Mhm.
um for your third goaltender to happen, and we still haven't seen them pull a goalie despite some of the score lines, right? There was the Minnesota game. um I was worried in the home Toronto game, Dylan, that it would happen,
Yeah.
because that game was pretty wacky and Seattle went down early, and I was like, "Oh boy, here we go." I have confidence in them because, like we talked about with O'Rourke, in our sort of 10 games in thing, he said, "Hey, the CJ's been working on something we asked them to, and we've been happy with that." And I talked about the work ethic, and you talk about earlier the off the ice stuff about people feeling welcome and stuff like that. CJ's part of that, in terms
Mhm.
of welcoming, and O'Rourke mentioned that about them and this locker room for the players and the energy they bring. So yeah, no, get very excited about the goaltender side of things. It's very fun, so happy about that. But yeah, no, I mean, none of this should be on them.
No.
None of the struggles. I would be like, have there been soft ones? Sure. But you're not losing games because you're goaltending.
No, I totally agree. They've been fantastic, and it felt like they were, yeah, kind of certainly on Schroeder's side of things getting better, and it felt like, yeah, Hannah Murphy had the massive 2 steps forward to start, maybe a step back, and then was starting to get some positive momentum there again as well. And I do think if you polled Seattle Torrent fans and you said,
Hmm.
"What's the one thing that you would change about the Torrent, or what's the one thing about the Torrent that's upset you?" I think the number one response that you'd get has just been that CJ hasn't started a game yet, right? Like,
Hey, yeah,
I
I
think
get it.
that's been the one thing, and I get it too. So we'll see if when that it
There's
does end
some
up
schedule
occurring.
congestion coming.
Yeah. No, I think it makes more sense post-Olympic break actually because of how tight the schedule is.
Mm.
During that first half, like just to kind of bookend the podcast on this, you mentioned at the beginning the starting and the stopping of everything throughout the whole
Yep,
process. And I would say that continued into the season starting because we had 2 breaks for rivalry series where there would
that's
just
right,
go a week or
that's
2
right.
without anything going on. So it's gonna be a fast finish once they come back. It's gonna feel like a whirlwind,
Oh,
um, a torrent, a downpour of Seattle Torrent games, if you will, if everyone will allow me.
goodness. I was gonna look at the schedule and yeah, no, I mean, there are, like, March 11th, March 13th, March 15th, March 19th, 21st, April 4th, April 7th. There's a back-to-back in this, in the 7th and
Yeah.
the 8th in Montreal and Ottawa. Um, but then you said the downpour of this, and I kinda lost my train of thought for a second.
It's very fair, very fair. But yeah, no, exciting stuff for when the torrent get back underway again. Most of the team still in Seattle practicing, working on stuff, going to be ready to go once that time comes. And then for the players, the Olympics again. I mean, I already threw out the numbers for Julia Gosling leading Team Canada in goals and tied in points. And on the USA side of things, with Hillary Knight, Alex Carpenter, and Hannah Bilka, all 3 of them are in the top 10 in scoring for the entire Olympic tournament. Just all the players there at the Olympics, they are 3 of the top 10 in scoring. And then you
Hmm.
mentioned Teralova and, what she's been able to do captaining Czechia, and everything there, holding it down, leadership-wise and play-wise and everything. So they have been making their mark, in Italy on the international stage for everybody to see, and that's been great to see, and we'll see, what that means for them coming home soon here, Charles.
I miss it. I miss it. But hey, I mean, it'll be cool. I have to imagine we see at least a couple torrent players representing their country towards the very end of these Olympics when they close things out.
Yep, definitely, definitely. Anything left before we just kinda end this? I feel
No,
like we
we
went
kind
over
of
everything.
went through everything,
Yeah.
which I'm not gonna complain about, but it just kind of makes you wish that there was a game at least somewhere in the near future.
Yeah. That is the one bummer about everything. We're still over 2 weeks out from being able to watch torrent hockey again, but you know what? Time seems to fly faster and faster the older I get, so I'm sure it'll feel like it gets here pretty quick. That's gonna do it for this episode of The Downpour. Thanks so much for listening, everybody, and we'll see you all next time.